The galaxy thought humanity was small, insignificant, a species clinging to a single blue world, barely stepping out into the stars. They saw our colonies and laughed at their size. They saw our ships and measured them against their massive fleets. They believed the humans would bend, that our kind would yield when the great empires pressed their weight upon us. To them, Earth was not a threat, only a curiosity. But what they never understood, what they could not comprehend, was that silence does not mean weakness, and patience does not mean surrender. Humanity had learned to survive by hiding its teeth until the moment came to bite. It began with whispers, rumors moving through the space stations and trade hubs where alien species gathered, stories of human ships vanishing into uncharted sectors and never returning, at least not in public. Observers noted the sudden secrecy, the way Earth's diplomats deflected questions, the way military transmissions grew more encrypted than ever before. The galaxy believed it was incompetence. They assumed we had stretched too far and were losing control of our fragile colonies. They thought humans were unprepared for the challenges of space. They thought wrong. Because while the galaxy dismissed us, humanity was building something in the dark. Out beyond the official charts, past the nebulae where no sensors could easily see, work had begun. Entire star systems became hidden workshops. Moons were hollowed out and turned into shipyards. Fleets were constructed in silence, their existence erased from every known record. Billions of tons of steel and plasma cannons were shaped into a force unlike anything the galaxy had imagined. And all the while, Earth played the part of the underdog, pretending to be fragile while its war machine grew in the shadows. The truth was, humanity had always carried war in its bones. Our history was soaked in it. Conflicts that had reshaped continents, revolutions that had torn down empires, battles that had been fought with sticks, steel, and fire before we ever reached the stars. While alien civilizations had grown soft in their long peace, humans sharpened themselves on conflict after conflict. We did not like war, but we understood it better than anyone. And when the galaxy forced our hand, when they pushed too far, they were going to learn what it meant to awaken a predator that had been waiting in silence. The spark came from arrogance. An alien empire, the largest and most powerful in the spiral arm, decided that human trade routes were theirs to take. They sent a fleet, not enormous by their standards, but more than enough to overwhelm what they thought was Earth's pathetic defense force. They expected compliance. They expected surrender. Instead, humanity answered with fire. A handful of ships appeared, outdated on the surface, but armed with weapons no one had seen before. They fought with a ferocity that shocked the galaxy, crippling vessels that had centuries of dominance behind them. But still, the Empire pressed harder, sending more ships, surrounding the colonies, certain they would crush the resistance. That was when the first hints appeared. Human commanders no longer seemed worried. Their responses grew sharper, more confident. It was as if they were waiting for something, and the galaxy began to wonder, what were the humans hiding? The empires laughed it off, saying humanity was, bluffing, stretching its desperation into a show. Yet deep down, unease spread. Merchants whispered of vast fleets seen only in fragments. Explorers swore they had stumbled across shipyards hidden behind stars that didn't appear on any map. The signs were there, but arrogance blinded the galaxy. Among the human population, rumors spread too. Colonists spoke of entire convoys disappearing into deep space, loaded with supplies, never to return. Military families noticed sudden disappearances of officers, reassigned to classified projects. Workers on distant mining colonies whispered of massive shipments of ore, far greater than any colony could need. Something was happening, and even humanity's own people didn't fully understand the scale of it. All they knew was that when the time came, their species would not stand alone. The galaxy underestimated us because they saw only the surface. They saw the smiling diplomats, the humble traders, the small fleets that looked fragile compared to their massive war machines. They never realized that humanity had already seen this story play out 1,000 times in history. Empires always underestimated the ones they believed were weaker. And every time, the underestimated fought back harder than anyone expected. The galaxy thought humans were children in the stars. They didn't know that the children had built their own arsenal in the shadows. The day came when the alien armadas gathered in orbit around a human colony, demanding submission. Their voices carried arrogance, mocking the idea that humanity could resist. They broadcast their threats across every channel, letting the entire galaxy witness what they thought would be our surrender. But instead of silence, humanity responded. With a single message, calm, cold, unshaken. The words were simple. "You've mistaken patience for weakness. Now see what we've prepared." The stars changed that day. From the blackness of space, ships began to emerge. Not dozens, not hundreds, thousands, entire armadas, gleaming with fresh steel, engines burning bright. Ships larger than anything the galaxy believed humanity could build. Carriers filled with fighters, dreadnoughts bristling with weapons, formations so precise they looked like a single body moving together. For centuries, the galaxy had laughed at humans. In a single moment, they stopped laughing. The aliens had expected a fight. They had not expected a war machine waiting in silence. They had not expected the actual human armada. And as the fleet spread across the stars, forming walls of firepower, a cold realization fell across every empire. Humanity had never been unprepared. Humanity had been waiting. But even then, as the first battles ignited and the galaxy reeled in shock, there was still something no one understood. For all the ships, humanity revealed for all the fleets that appeared, whispers continued. Rumors that this was not even the full strength of Earth. That deeper in the dark, beyond the reach of any spy, there were still more fleets, still more weapons, still more secrets waiting to be unleashed. And if the galaxy pushed further, they would see not just an armada, but the full fury of a species that had been underestimated for far too long. The galaxy had made one mistake. They thought humans were weak. But now, as the stars filled with fire and silence broke under the thunder of war, they were about to learn the truth. And the truth was simple. Humanity had been hiding its teeth. Now, the bite had begun. Would the galaxy unite against us? Or would they break apart in fear of what they had unleashed? That answer remained unknown. But one thing was certain. The galaxy would never underestimate humanity again. The galaxy had frozen in shock when the human armada emerged from the void. But to understand how such a force came to exist, one had to look back to the years before that day. It hadn't happened overnight. Humanity had carried the memory of vulnerability from the moment we first stepped beyond Earth. Our earliest colonies had been fragile, our first ships little more than extensions of planetary industries, never designed to face the predatory strength of ancient empires. We had survived because others ignored us, dismissing humans as irrelevant. But even then, even in those quiet years, the seeds of something greater were already being planted. It started with fear, not ambition. The first encounter with hostile alien warships had burned itself into the minds of human leaders. A single skirmish over a disputed trade route left a human convoy in ruins, its escorts shattered, its civilians taken or destroyed. The outrage was universal, but the truth was undeniable. At that time, humanity could not defend itself against the larger powers. It was then, in the council chambers back on Earth and in secret meetings scattered across the colonies, that a decision was made. If humanity was to survive in the galaxy, it would never again allow itself to be underestimated. From that moment, every project carried two faces. There were the public efforts, the visible growth of colonization, the expansion of trade, the partnerships that made humanity appear open and eager to join the interstellar community. But beneath that mask, in the dark corners of space, humanity built the other face. Secret fleets, hidden bases, classified research. Scientists who once worked on peaceful engineering projects suddenly found themselves reassigned under strict silence. Miners who believed they were working to expand colonies realized too late that the resources they extracted never returned to civilian use. Entire generations of workers and soldiers lived within that shadow, never speaking of what they knew, only trusting that one day the secrecy would matter. Yet secrecy was never easy. Families were torn apart as loved ones disappeared into assignments that could never be explained. Colonists whispered about missing convoys that had been redirected to special operations. Merchants noticed gaps in supply records. There were questions, but no answers. Only the firm hand of human leadership insisting that silence was survival. And though unease spread, humanity accepted it, because deep down everyone felt the same dread. One day, the galaxy would test us. As the years passed, the hidden fleets grew. Massive shipyards built into asteroids and buried under the crust of remote moons churned out warships in silence. Experimental drives pushed ships faster than anyone thought possible. Weapons were tested on uninhabited worlds, their blasts carving scars into barren rock that would never heal. Engineers worked in shifts that seemed endless, never allowed to speak of what they built, knowing only that they were crafting humanity's answer to the galaxy. Some of them died in accidents, buried in places no one would ever see, but their names became part of the unspoken promise. Every loss was another reason to finish what had been started. Even the ordinary citizens, though never told the truth, could sense the shift. On distant colonies, military presence increased. Supply ships carried unusual cargo. Entire sectors were declared restricted zones, forbidden to civilians. The official explanations were vague: scientific research, hazardous environments, unstable stars. But people were not blind. They spoke quietly in bars and markets, wondering what was really happening beyond the stars. Some feared it. Some resented it. But most felt something else. A strange, quiet pride. Whatever their leaders were hiding, it was for humanity's survival. And then came the moment when the galaxy forced our hand. The alien empire, swollen with pride and certain of its dominance, demanded submission. They wanted Earth's colonies, Earth's trade, Earth's future. They thought it would be easy because the galaxy had always believed humans were weak. But the truth was that the hidden Armada had been waiting for this exact day. Every ship launched, every weapon tested, every life lost in secrecy had been leading to this moment. When the human fleets revealed themselves, the galaxy trembled. But even then, few understood the scale of what they were seeing. For all the thousands of ships that appeared, there were whispers of more. Fleets deeper in the void, fleets larger than what had already stunned the galaxy. Some said humanity had built entire fortresses in uncharted systems, cities that existed only to supply the Armada. Others believed the human fleets stretched further than any single empire's reach, scattered like hidden claws, ready to strike at will. But the truth, the real truth, remained locked behind layers of silence. Even within humanity itself, only a few knew the full scale of what had been built. To the soldiers standing on the bridges of those ships, it felt like awakening from a dream. For so long they had been hidden, shadows in the dark, and now they stood revealed before the galaxy. The pride was immense, but so was the weight. They knew this was only the beginning. The galaxy would not simply retreat in fear, it would fight. And when it did, humanity would have to prove that the years of secrecy, the decades of sacrifice, had been worth it. The galaxy underestimated us, and that mistake had already cost them their certainty. But beneath the awe, beneath the terror of those first moments, one question lingered in every mind, human and alien alike. What else is hidden? If humanity had built this, if humanity had hidden this, then what else was waiting in the dark, unseen, unspoken, ready to be unleashed? The answer had not yet been given. And as the stars burned with the first sparks of war, that unanswered question became the shadow over every world. Humanity had revealed its armada, but perhaps that was not the end of the secret, only the beginning. The first clash was not a grand battle, but a spark in the dark. The alien empire sent a fleet to test the strength of the human armada, confident that it would shatter beneath their firepower. They came with ships the size of cities, vessels that had dominated the spiral arm for centuries. The galaxy watched, believing the humans had overplayed their hand, that their revealed strength was impressive, but not enough to match a true empire. What followed silenced that belief. When the fleets met at the edge of a barren system, the void erupted with fire. Human ships moved with a precision the aliens had not expected. They did not fight like prey. They fought like predators that had studied every weakness of their enemy. The alien dreadnoughts unleashed their cannons, beams that had once leveled continents, but the humans dodged them with speed that seemed impossible for ships of their size. The hidden weapons, the ones humanity had never allowed to be seen before, came alive. Lances of energy pierced armor that was said to be unbreakable. Missiles struck in coordinated waves, swarming through shields that had never before been breached. In less than an hour, the Empire's test fleet was gone, their arrogance scattered across the stars. But victory brought no relief. If anything, it only deepened the conflict, because now the galaxy truly understood the danger. What had once been dismissed as rumor was now undeniable fact. Humanity had built an armada strong enough to challenge the greatest powers. The Empire vowed vengeance, swearing they would bring their full strength to crush Earth. Other empires, watching from the shadows, grew fearful. Some debated joining the Empire in its campaign, hoping to erase humanity before its power grew any further. Others whispered of alliances, seeing in humans a chance to challenge the old order. The galaxy split between those who saw humanity as a threat to be destroyed and those who saw humanity as a weapon to be wielded. For the humans, this was the moment they had feared and prepared for. The Armada was real, the fleets ready, but war on this scale meant more than ships and weapons. It meant supply lines stretching across the void. It meant colonies placed in danger. It meant ordinary people, farmers and miners, traders and families, suddenly caught in a storm they had not chosen. Some embraced it with pride, believing humanity had finally claimed its place among the stars. Others feared the cost, whispering that the hidden armada had brought the wrath of the galaxy down upon them. Amid the rising storm, subplots unfolded across the human sphere. On one colony near the frontier, workers discovered that their entire moon had been hollowed out. A secret shipyard hidden beneath its surface. For years, they had believed their shipments of ore went to distant colonies. Now, as fleets rose from beneath their feet, they realized they had been part of the secret all along. Pride swelled in some, betrayal in others, and the colony found itself divided. Families argued over whether the deception had been worth it, whether survival justified being kept in ignorance. On Earth itself, leaders faced a growing crisis. The Armada was revealed, but now the question of control loomed large. Military commanders, who had lived their lives in secrecy, demanded full authority to strike before the alien empire gathered its full strength. Politicians, wary of committing to an all-out war, argued for diplomacy, fearing that the human species might burn itself out before it truly rose. And in the background, whispers of dissent spread, voices asking if humanity's survival truly required the destruction of others, or if a path of peace was still possible. Even among the soldiers of the Armada, doubts surfaced. For years, had trained in silence, believing they were protectors of their people. Now, staring across the stars at fleets preparing for war, they wondered what role they truly played. Were they defenders or conquerors? Would history remember them as saviors of humanity or as the ones who unleashed chaos upon the galaxy? The pride of unveiling their strength was fading, replaced by the heavy weight of what was to come. Meanwhile, the alien empire moved swiftly. Their humiliation at losing a test fleet could not be hidden. To maintain their grip on the galaxy, they needed a decisive response. They began to gather their war machine, fleets drawn from dozens of systems, soldiers conscripted by the millions. Entire industries shifted overnight to the work of war. Yet even as they prepared, unease spread among their people. If humans had built such an armada in silence, what else were they hiding? The Empire's citizens began to ask dangerous questions, doubts that eroded the certainty of their rulers. Other alien powers took advantage of the rising tension. Some sent envoys in secret to Earth, offering alliances if humanity would support their claims against the Empire. Others sent spies, desperate to uncover how humans had built such fleets without detection. A few, terrified of the unknown, began mobilizing their own hidden weapons. In every corner of the galaxy, humanity's revelation had become the spark that set old rivalries ablaze. The balance of power was broken, and no one knew where the fire would spread next. Among the colonies closest to the frontier, fear turned into defiance. These were the people who had lived under the shadow of alien raiders, who had felt the helplessness of being prey. Now, seeing the human armada stand against the Empire, they were the loudest voices demanding war. They saw this moment as justice, long overdue. But their cries clashed with the cautious voices from Earth's inner worlds, where families feared the destruction of their homes, where leaders worried that humanity's survival might vanish in the flames of conflict. The species itself stood divided, pride and fear wrestling in every heart. Yet through all the arguments, through all the doubts, the truth remained the same. The conflict could not be avoided. The Empire would come, and when they did, humanity would have to stand against the full weight of their power. The fleets were ready, but readiness did not erase the uncertainty. No one knew if the Armada would be enough. No one knew if humanity's hidden strength could survive when the galaxy finally united against it. In the quiet moments between battles, in the silence before the storm, there was a strange stillness. Soldiers on the bridges of their ships tightened their grips on controls, waiting for orders that could send them into battles history would never forget. Families on distant colonies clung to one another, unsure if tomorrow would bring safety or fire. Leaders stared into star charts, seeing not coordinates, but choices that could shape the future of their entire species. And across the galaxy, countless eyes watched humanity with a mixture of awe and terror, waiting to see what the underestimated children of Earth would do next. The human armada had been revealed, but the war had not yet truly begun. The Empire gathered its strength, humanity steeled its will, and the galaxy held its breath. The conflict was no longer a question of if, but when. And when it came, the stars themselves would tremble. The Empire did not wait long before unleashing its wrath. The humiliation of losing its first fleet to humanity had spread across the galaxy like wildfire, and the rulers of that vast dominion could not allow such weakness to stand. Within weeks, entire armadas were mobilized. Stars that had once been quiet with trade and routine now burned with the light of warships, gathering in numbers that dwarfed anything most had ever seen. For centuries, the Empire had been the iron fist of the spiral arm, its power unquestioned. Now, for the first time, that power was about to be tested by the species it had once dismissed as irrelevant. On the human side, the Armada prepared in silence. The first victory had given the galaxy a glimpse of our hidden strength, but those within the command ranks knew the cost of arrogance. The Empire was far from broken, and the true storm was still ahead. In every shipyard, engineers worked without rest, reinforcing armor, upgrading weapons, ensuring every vessel could endure what was coming. Supply fleets ran endless convoys, carrying fuel and ammunition through hidden routes. Entire colonies were transformed into fortresses, ready to resist the invasion they knew was coming. And above it all, the Armada gathered in formations so vast they looked like moving continents across the void. Among the soldiers, tension rose with every passing day. They had lived for years in the secrecy of preparation, and their first taste of battle had proven their training was real. But as they stared at the endless reports of the Empire's mobilization, they felt the weight of what was coming. Many wrote messages to their families, uncertain if they would ever return. Some found courage in the belief that they were defending humanity's future. Others feared that their lives, their sacrifices, would be swallowed in the chaos of a war too large to comprehend, yet all of them knew there was no turning back. Humanity had revealed its strength, and now it would be tested to the very edge. The galaxy watched with fear and fascination. Smaller powers held their fleets back, unwilling to commit to one side until the outcome became clear. Some hoped the humans would shatter the Empire, breaking centuries of dominance and giving them freedom. Others prayed the Empire would crush Earth quickly, restoring the old balance before it collapsed entirely. Across countless worlds, civilians huddled around broadcast channels, waiting for the first reports of the Great War. The fate of the spiral arm had become tied to humanity's defiance. Inside the Empire, fear turned to fury. Their leaders promised swift annihilation of the human race, vowing to make an example so brutal that no other species would dare rise again. But among their soldiers, doubts spread quietly. The stories of human weapons piercing unbreakable armor, of ships moving with impossible precision, haunted them. Many of them wondered if they were marching into a war unlike any they had ever faced. Their doubts were silenced by their commanders, but unease lingered in every fleet as they surged toward human space. In the dark between the stars, smaller conflicts began to ignite. Human scouts clashed with alien patrols. Convoys vanished, ambushed by hidden forces loyal to the Empire. Colonies on the frontier reported skirmishes, testing attacks meant to probe their defenses. Every engagement built the tension higher, each one a spark against the kindling of war. Humanity held its ground, but the sense of being surrounded, of the storm closing in, grew heavier with each passing day. For the people living on the colonies nearest the front lines, life became a daily struggle against fear. Families reinforced shelters, children learned evacuation drills, and farmers armed themselves as militia. The sight of human warships passing overhead became both a comfort and a reminder of the danger. Every distant explosion, every flicker of light in the sky carried the question, was this the day the Empire's fleets would arrive in full? Back on Earth, the debates among leaders reached a breaking point. Some demanded immediate strikes deep into enemy territory, believing the only path to survival was to shatter the Empire's will before it could fully unleash its strength. Others argued for defense, for holding the line and waiting for the Empire to exhaust itself. And still others, quieter but no less passionate, urged diplomacy, believing that humanity had revealed enough strength to force negotiations. But the moment for words was fading. The Empire was not coming to talk, it was coming to crush. The human armada moved into position at the edge of the frontier. Thousands of ships formed into vast formations, their engines glowing like constellations brought to life. In command ships, officers stared at star maps filled with red markers, each one representing an enemy fleet advancing through space. The sheer scale of it threatened to overwhelm the mind, but the humans refused to flinch. For centuries, the galaxy had believed them weak. Now, standing on the edge of war, they were determined to prove otherwise. Whispers spread even among humanities. own ranks. Was the Armada we could see truly the full extent of our power? Or were there still fleets hidden deeper in the void, waiting to appear at the critical moment? The secrecy that had protected humanity for so long now became part of the fear and the hope. Allies wondered if humans had yet more to reveal. Enemies worried that the Armada already visible was only the surface of something even greater. The uncertainty became a weapon of its own, shaping every decision across the galaxy. Then came the signal. Scouts reported the Empire's main fleets entering human space. The scale of it defied comprehension. Tens of thousands of warships, supported by endless convoys of supply vessels, advancing like a tide across the stars. Their weapons glowed, their banners shone, and their intent was unmistakable. They were coming to end humanity's defiance in one decisive blow. The galaxy held its breath as the inevitable collision drew closer. On the bridges of human ships, silence reigned as the reports came in. Officers gave quiet orders, systems powered up, weapons charged. The tension was so thick it seemed to press against the walls of every vessel. Soldiers gripped their stations, hearts racing, knowing that, in moments, the greatest battle in human history would begin. Outside the viewports, space was calm, the stars distant and serene, but beneath that calm was the storm waiting to break. Across the colonies, alarms sounded. Civilians were rushed into shelters, militia units took their positions, and families clung together in fear and defiance. Everyone knew the Empire's fleets were closing in, and everyone understood what was at stake. This was not just a battle for territory. It was a battle for survival, for the right of humanity to exist as more than prey in a galaxy of predators. In the Empire's fleets, confidence mixed uneasily with dread. Their commanders spoke of swift victory, of crushing the upstart humans, with overwhelming force. But the soldiers remembered the whispers, the stories of the hidden Armada, of weapons no one had seen before. They marched forward because they had no choice, but many of them wondered if they were walking into a war that would devour them. As the two forces closed in on one another, the galaxy itself seemed to hold still, communications across countless, systems filled with speculation, fear, and hope. Would the humans be destroyed, their hidden strength erased in a single blow? Or would the Empire, the ancient power that had ruled for centuries, finally meet its match? No one knew. All they knew was that the collision was inevitable, and when it came, it would change everything. The fleets drew closer. The distance between them shrank with every passing hour. On one side, the human Armada, forged in secrecy, fueled by determination, carrying the pride and fear of an entire species. On the other, the Empire, vast and unyielding, determined to crush the defiance that threatened its reign. The void between them was empty for now, but soon it would blaze with fire and death. And then, just as the first weapons were about to be unleashed, a strange silence fell across every channel. Both fleets, human and alien, detected something else in the void. Something massive, something neither side had expected. For a heartbeat, war paused. Not because peace had been found, but because both sides realized they were not alone in the darkness. The climax loomed, the moment where history would turn. Humanity stood ready. The Empire advanced without mercy, and the galaxy waited to see who would survive the fire to come. The silence before the first strike was the heaviest silence the stars had ever known. The silence that fell between the two armadas was heavy, unnatural. For days, humans had prepared for the Empire's strike, their fleets drawn tight across the frontier, weapons primed, soldiers braced for the storm. The Empire's fleets, a tide of steel and firepower, had surged forward with absolute confidence, ready to erase humanity's defiance in one sweeping blow. But now, both sides hesitated, because what their sensors picked up in that moment was not each other. It was something else. Something vast, moving in the shadows of the void. At first, the readings made no sense. The signals were faint but enormous, scattered across multiple sectors at once. Human commanders stared at their consoles in disbelief. The Empire's officers, equally shaken, adjusted their scanners, certain it had to be an error. But the longer they watched, the clearer it became. There was another presence out there, and it was big. The first images came from long-range probes, blurry at first, distorted by interference, then sharp enough to see the outlines. Colossal ships, larger than even the greatest human dreadnoughts, drifting at the edges of known space. Their designs were strange, nothing like human engineering, nothing like the Empire's familiar style. They were angular, almost organic, as if grown rather than built. And there were not just a few of them. Dozens, hundreds, more signals appeared with every sweep of the scanners. In that instant, the humans realized a truth that sent a chill through every heart. The galaxy had not just underestimated Earth. It had underestimated itself. Something else had been hiding in the dark all along. For the human armada, the revelation brought both fear and opportunity. Some commanders argued that this unknown presence might be the true reason humanity had prepared in secret for so long. Perhaps our leaders had not only anticipated war with the Empire, but with something far greater. Others whispered of ancient warnings, of old records buried in Earth's past that hinted at civilizations rising and falling long before humans ever looked up at the stars. Could this be what humanity had really been preparing for? Not the Empire, but something older, something worse. The Empire's fleets reacted with confusion and anger. To them, the appearance of another power in the void was unacceptable. Their entire dominance had been built on crushing rivals before they could rise. Now, confronted with an unknown threat of impossible size, they wavered. Some captains urged an immediate retreat, fearing ambush. Others demanded a reckless charge, determined to destroy both the humans and these intruders in one strike. Their leadership hesitated, and that hesitation rippled through their ranks. On Earth and across the colonies, the news spread faster than officials could contain it. Broadcasts lit up with grainy images of the mysterious ships. Panic surged. Families who had already braced themselves for war now found themselves facing something far beyond the Empire. Were these new arrivals enemies or saviors? No one knew. But fear fed on the unknown, and the galaxy trembled at the thought of another force stepping onto the battlefield. For the soldiers aboard the human armada, the tension became unbearable. They had trained for the Empire. They had prepared for overwhelming firepower and endless waves of ships. But this was something different. Some prayed it was an ally. Some unlooked-for hand that would turn the tide in humanity's favor. Others suspected the worst, that humanity and the Empire alike were prey, and the true predator had just arrived. Still, the standoff held. The human fleets held formation. The Empire's armadas stopped their advance, and in the darkness beyond, the unknown ships drifted closer, silent, watching. Their silence was worse than any declaration of war because it left every possibility open. In command chambers, human leaders argued in whispers. Should they attempt contact? Should they hold position and wait? Should they strike first? Every choice carried danger. To send a message might expose weakness. To remain silent might be seen as fear. To fire would risk provoking something whose power they could not yet measure. Yet the longer the silence stretched, the greater the dread became. Whispers spread across the human fleets. Some claimed the mysterious ships had been seen before. Faint shadows at the edges of exploration reports, always dismissed as errors. Others swore the designs matched ancient myths, passed down in fragmented records from Earth's earliest astronomers, tales of civilizations that rose and fell before recorded history. Whether true or not, the fear grew sharper with every passing hour. The Empire, too, faced its own turmoil. For centuries, it had projected an image of absolute dominance. Now, Faced with both humanity's defiance and the sudden emergence of another unknown force, cracks began to show. Some within their command councils feared that their own people would turn against them if they appeared weak. Others argued that the humans must have known of this, that Earth's secrecy had not been about their own fleets, but about these hidden giants. Suspicion twisted their every decision, and the thought that humans might have allies lurking in the void filled them with a rage that threatened to boil over. For humanity, the second twist of the conflict changed everything. It was no longer just about survival against the Empire. Now the question was whether the galaxy itself was about to face a power neither side could control. The human armada stood ready. The Empire bristled with firepower, and the unknown ships drifted closer with every hour, their silence like a blade hanging above both sides. In the colonies, ordinary people clung to every scrap of news. Some dared to hope that the mysterious newcomers might strike against the Empire, buying humanity time to survive. Others feared that the new arrivals would see no difference between human and alien, crushing both as easily as stepping on ants. The suspense bled into every home, every shelter, every hidden bunker. The stars that had once been symbols of hope now seemed to watch with cold indifference. Back in the human fleet, soldiers stood at their stations, eyes fixed on the darkness beyond. Every movement of the unknown ships was tracked with obsessive detail. Every whisper on the comms carried the same question: what do they want? Were they waiting to see which side weakened first, planning to strike the victor? Or were they here to deliver a message that no one was yet ready to hear? The Empire's fleets began to shift uneasily, their formations faltering. For the first time in memory, they looked vulnerable. The humans saw it, and the thought rippled through their armada like fire. If the Empire was afraid, if their iron grip was breaking, then perhaps this was the moment. But to act too soon could doom them all. The galaxy itself seemed to hold its breath. Every world, every station, every colony waited in silence for the spark that would decide their fate. The Empire stood ready to crush. Humanity stood ready to survive, and the unknown giants loomed in the dark, a shadow that threatened to rewrite everything. And then, just as the tension reached its breaking point, the mysterious ships moved. Their formations shifted with impossible precision, as if answering a signal no one else could hear. Lights flared across their hulls, patterns that no human or alien language could interpret. For a moment, the void itself seemed alive with their presence. And in that moment, both humanity and the Empire realized the same terrible truth. Whatever these newcomers were, they were not here to watch. They were here to act. The clash between humanity and the Empire had seemed inevitable. But now, with the arrival of this silent third force, the stakes had risen far beyond survival. This was no longer a war between two powers. This was the beginning of something greater, something darker, something that could decide the fate of the entire galaxy. The void lit up like fire as the unknown fleet finally moved. What had seemed like silent giants lurking at the edge of the battlefield now surged forward with terrifying speed, their vast silhouettes cutting through the dark. Humanity and the Empire both froze, their weapons still locked on each other. But every eye turned toward this new threat. The galaxy had waited for the clash between Earth's hidden armada and the Empire's war machine, but no one had expected a third power to strike at the very moment of collision. The mysterious ships unleashed energy unlike anything either side had seen. Not plasma, not railguns. It was light itself, focused into beams that sliced through shields as if they weren't even there. One of the Empire's massive dreadnoughts, a ship that had ruled battlefields for centuries, was cut in half with a single strike. Another ship, a human cruiser at the edge of formation, was vaporized before its alarms could even sound. Panic rippled across both fleets. In the span of seconds, the balance of war was rewritten. The humans reacted first. Their commanders gave the order to scatter formations, forcing the fleet into smaller groups that could dodge the sweeping beams. The Empire, arrogant and rigid, tried to hold its tight formations and paid the price. Their ships were cut down in lines, whole wings destroyed in blinding flashes. For the first time in generations, the Empire's fleets screamed not with confidence, but with fear. Yet even as both sides fought to survive, humanity's commanders understood something vital. These newcomers had not come to side with anyone. They were not allies. They were predators, and every ship in their path was prey. The war humanity had prepared for was suddenly something else. A battle not only against the Empire, but for existence itself. The Armada shifted into action. Human ships darted into the chaos, using their speed and precision to avoid the worst of the beams. Squadrons of fighters launched in swarms, weaving through the fire to strike at the massive shapes of the newcomers. Explosions flared across their hulls, but even as damage spread, the unknown ships seemed to regenerate, sealing wounds with strange, living metal that pulsed like muscle. Humanity's weapons hurt them, but not enough. The Empire, blinded by rage and desperation, turned both on the newcomers and the humans. Their commanders refused to retreat, ordering their fleets forward in a storm of fire. For a brief, savage moment, the void became three wars at once: humans against the Empire against the intruders, and the intruders against all. The stars themselves seemed to tremble under the weight of the destruction. But amid the chaos, something remarkable happened. A section of the human armada and a wing of the Empire's ships found themselves side by side, caught between the sweeping beams of the newcomers. For a heartbeat, their weapons turned on each other. Then, in silence, they shifted fire, not at one another, but together at the massive shape looming ahead. It was an alliance born not of trust, but of survival. And as the battle raged, more and more of both fleets began to do the same. Human commanders seized the chance. Orders went out across the Armada: hold fire on the Empire, focus on the intruders. Empire leaders hesitated, but their soldiers followed what they saw working. Slowly, against every instinct, humanity and its greatest enemy fought side by side. The galaxy's oldest predator and its newest upstart turned their fury on the giants that threatened to devour them both. For the first time, the mysterious ships faltered. Their beams swept wide, missing targets. Explosions tore into their hulls, faster than they could heal. The combined firepower of two great forces, once aimed at each other, now tore into the newcomers with relentless precision. The void blazed with destruction as ships on every side were lost, but slowly the balance began to shift. Yet just when hope flickered, the twist came. As one of the massive intruder ships collapsed in flames, its wreckage broke apart. Not into debris, but into smaller vessels, dozens of them, each as deadly as the whole. Humanity and the Empire watched in horror as the battle doubled in ferocity. What they had believed to be single ships were hives, carriers of destruction that multiplied with every wound. The war they thought they were winning had only grown worse. Still, humanity did not break. The soldiers who had trained in silence, who had carried the burden of secrecy for generations, now fought with a ferocity that stunned even their temporary allies. Human ships darted through the chaos, striking at the smaller vessels with speed no Empire ship could match. Fighters sacrificed themselves to pierce the regenerating hulls, carving openings for larger guns to strike. Entire squadrons were lost. But with every sacrifice, another of the intruders fell. The Empire, brutal and unyielding, unleashed its full war machine. For the first time, their pride was stripped away, leaving only raw survival. Their fleets fought without restraint, pouring everything into the fight, and together, humanity and the Empire carved through the intruder forces, leaving burning husks drifting across the void. At last, after hours of chaos, the survivors of the intruder fleet began to retreat. Their movements were silent, they're strange, ships drifting back into the darkness from which they had come. They left behind wreckage, both their own and that of countless human and Empire ships. The battlefield was a graveyard of steel and fire, but for now, the storm had passed. Silence returned to the void. Humanity's armada, bloodied but unbroken, held its ground. The Empire's fleets, crippled and staggering, lingered nearby. No shots were fired. Both sides stared at one another, surrounded by the wreckage of a war they had not planned to fight. The hatred remained, the old conflict still alive, but something had changed. They had seen each other not just as enemies, but as survivors of something greater. And then came the final twist. As human commanders scanned the retreating signals of the intruder fleet, a hidden layer of data appeared. At first it looked like static. Then, as the patterns were analyzed, it became clear. It was a message. Not in human language, not in the Empire's tongue, but in something deeper, mathematics, universal and undeniable. The message repeated again and again across the retreating ships, simple but chilling. This was only the beginning. The galaxy held its breath as the words spread. Humanity had revealed its armada. The Empire had unleashed its wrath. Both had nearly destroyed one another, and yet the true enemy had barely begun to show its strength. What had seemed like the climax of war was only the first battle in something far larger. Human soldiers, exhausted and scarred, clung to the hope that survival was enough. Empire commanders, shaken and furious, swore vengeance not only on humans, but on the shadow that had humiliated them. And somewhere in the dark, beyond the wreckage and the silence, the intruders waited, their message echoing across the stars. The climax had come, but the story was far from over. Humanity had proven it could not be underestimated. The Empire had been forced to bend, if only for survival, and the galaxy now knew that something even greater loomed beyond them both. The war for survival had only just begun, and the next strike could decide not just the fate of Earth or the Empire, but of every world in the spiral arm. Would humanity rise again when the intruders returned, or would the galaxy finally collapse under the weight of a war no one had foreseen? The answer remained hidden in the silence, waiting for the next fire to ignite the stars. The battlefield drifted in silence, broken ships scattering across the void like bones in a graveyard. Fires still burned in the husks of what had once been. Warships, human and alien alike. The survivors clung to the wreckage, engines sputtering, shields drained, but still alive. Humanity's armada, though battered, remained standing. The Empire's fleets, crippled and bleeding pride, lingered nearby. Both sides had expected the other to fall. Instead, both had seen something far worse rise from the shadows and nearly consume them. For humanity, the victory was heavy with loss. Thousands of soldiers would never return home, their ships reduced to silence. Colonies held vigils for the fighters who had sacrificed themselves in desperate maneuvers, tearing into the hulls of the intruder ships to give their comrades a chance to survive. On Earth, the news spread faster than officials could control. Families wept, but they also held their heads high. Humanity had endured its first great war among the stars and proven to the galaxy that it was not prey. The armada that had once been hidden in secrecy was now carved into the memory of every world that had watched. The Empire, though furious at its humiliation, could not deny what it had witnessed. Its fleets had been torn apart not by humans alone, but by a force that neither side could control. For the first time in centuries, the Empire felt vulnerable. The iron image of their invincibility had cracked, and that truth spread like fire among their people. Whispers of rebellion stirred in systems long held under their control. Their soldiers, once unquestioning, now wondered if their leaders truly knew how to protect them. The Empire's strength remained vast, but its certainty was gone. In the aftermath, humanity and the Empire faced each other in uneasy silence. Weapons remained primed, hatred still burned, but no one moved. Both sides had seen that survival required more than old grudges. For a brief, unspoken moment, there was something that looked like respect. They had stood together, if only for survival, and that bond, however fragile, lingered. No treaty was signed, no alliance declared, but the memory of that battle remained etched in every soldier's mind. Across the human colonies, life slowly returned, though nothing was the same. The secrecy that had once divided families now ended, replaced by pride in the truth. Colonists who had once wondered where their sacrifices had gone now knew. The hidden Armada had not been a dream. It had been real, and it had saved them all. Yet there was no triumph without cost. Entire convoys had vanished, families broken, and every colony bore scars of loss. But those scars carried meaning, proof that humanity could stand against not just the Empire, but whatever else lay in the dark. The unanswered question remained: who were the intruders? Humanity's greatest minds worked tirelessly to decode the strange message left in the wreckage. This was only the beginning. It was a warning, or perhaps a promise, that what they had faced was not the full strength of this unknown enemy. Scientists pored over the fragments recovered from the battlefield. Some pieces pulsed faintly, alive with strange energy, as if the ships themselves were not machines but organisms. The discovery unsettled everyone. Humanity had built its armada from steel and fire, but these newcomers were something else. Something that blurred the line between life and weapon. For the soldiers of the Armada, the memories of the battle haunted them. Many had believed they were prepared for anything, trained endlessly for war against the Empire. Yet nothing had prepared them for the sight of their enemies becoming allies in the face of something greater. They carried that memory home, unsure. How to feel? Pride? Yes. Relief, perhaps, but also unease, because deep down, they knew the truth. If those ships returned in greater numbers, even the combined might of humanity and the Empire might not be enough. On Earth, leaders faced impossible choices. Some pushed to expand the Armada further, to build even greater fleets, knowing that the intruders would one day return. Others argued that survival would not come from war alone, but from unity. They pointed to the moment when human and Empire ships had fought side by side as proof that old enemies could no longer afford their hatred. Yet not all agreed. Many still saw the Empire as the greater threat, the predator that had oppressed the galaxy for too long. The arguments raged, but through it all, one truth remained. Humanity was no longer underestimated. The galaxy at large shifted as well. Smaller powers, once afraid to act, now saw new possibilities. Some reached out to humanity, offering alliances, hoping to stand together when the intruders returned. Others, still fearful, clung to the Empire, believing its sheer size was their best chance for survival. The balance of power had been broken, and the ripples spread far beyond the battlefield. Everywhere, people whispered the same question. When the intruders come again, who will stand and who will fall? For ordinary humans, life went on, though forever changed. Farmers tilled soil under skies patrolled by human warships. Children grew up knowing that their parents had fought not just aliens, but something far more terrifying. In quiet corners of colonies, families told stories of the battle, of how humanity had revealed its hidden strength and refused to be broken. Pride mixed with fear, but hope lingered. Because for the first time, humanity knew it could shape the galaxy, not just endure it. And then came the final revelation. In the deepest archives of Earth, among records thought long forgotten, scientists uncovered fragments of old transmissions. Buried within signals from early space exploration were faint echoes, patterns almost identical to the message left by the intruders. Humanity had not only been watched recently, it had been watched for far longer, perhaps since before it left its own world. The realization chilled every heart. The intruders had always known about us. The hidden Armada had been built in secret, to surprise the galaxy, but perhaps it had been no surprise at all to those who waited in the dark. The story of that war ended not with conquest, not with surrender, but with a fragile silence. Humanity had survived, had revealed its true strength, and had forced the galaxy to see it not as prey, but as a force to be reckoned with. The Empire had been humbled, its certainty broken. The intruders had retreated, but not defeated. And in that silence lay both triumph and dread. Humanity had earned its place among the stars, but the shadow of the greater war to come loomed over everything. In the end, the lesson was clear. The galaxy had underestimated us, laughed at our weakness, dismissed us as children in the void. But we had revealed the truth. Humanity's Armada had risen from the shadows and stood unbroken against the greatest powers. And though the future was uncertain, though the intruders would return, one truth would never again be denied. Humanity would not bow. The stars themselves seemed to hold their breath, waiting for what came next. But for now, in that moment of quiet after the storm, humanity stood taller than ever before, no longer hidden, no longer underestimated, ready for whatever awaited in the endless dark.